Planting the seeds of our future is the most important thing we can be doing. Don't you agree? And saving seeds for our future is a simple yet powerful step. Take a moment to look around your garden. The plants that are doing really well are the ones to save seeds from. Learning to harvest seeds from those special plants is easier than you think, and with a bit of instruction, anyone can become a seed-saving superstar. Let Urban Farm U teach you how in our free upcoming seed-saving webinar. Just text the word SEEDS to 33444 to sign up, or visit urbanfarm.org for more information. Remember, that's SEEDS to 33444. You're listening to the Urban Farm Podcast, your partner in the Grow Your Own Food revolution. Whether you've just been introduced to urban farming or you're a lifelong advocate, we're sure you'll leave feeling more informed, equipped, and empowered to dig deeper into the soil of your local food economy. With you every step of the way, here's your host, Greg Peterson.
Today on the Urban Farm Podcast, we have Benjamin Fahrer of Topleaf Farms to talk about his experience with ecological design and the Urban Seed Project. Farmer Ben is an ecological farmer and builder. He has spent the last 18 years learning alternative ways of food production based on nature's design. He has managed and operated a number of farms, including Ocean Saw Organics in West Sonoma, and was the farm supervisor at Esalen Institute in Big Sur from 2008 to 2010. Farmer Ben received his BA in eco-dwelling and is a registered teacher with Tagari since 2007, having taught over 30 permaculture design courses in California, Costa Rica, and Mexico. He has been a delegate at the slow food gathering Terra Madre and continues to explore the social and ecological ethics that surround our food system. Now an urban transplant, Farmer Ben is excited to design and develop integrated systems that focus on food production, seeds, and starts, specifically for urban climates. Welcome to the show today, Farmer Ben.
Hey, Greg. It's great to be on the show with you.
Thank you for being here. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path that you took to where you're at today?
Oh, absolutely. It's been a very, very long and hard and adventurous and spontaneous and
I love
and
that.
Dynamic path.
Sounds very permaculture.
Yes, very holistic in the sense of learning as we grow, and I started, not on a farming path per se, but on a building one. I started framing houses with my dad when I was 14 up in Idaho, and fell back on that when I, after a year in college, I decided that I didn't want to just go into debt figuring out what I needed to do, but I'd rather enroll in the University of Life and major in direct experience. And so
How cool is that?
But I needed to make some money, so I fell back on my carpentry skills and very quickly realized that the consumption aspect of the construction world was not feeling right inside.
Yep.
Yeah, there was an intuitive aspect that kind of led me to inquire more deeply about what I wanted to be doing with my life. And it was hard work, and I enjoyed it, but it led me to think about growing things. And so I started, actually got a job building a farm out in Carmel Valley for a friend, someone who became a dear friend and mentor, John Kinder, who recently passed away. But he had this farm that you would not put a farm on at the top of a mountain, beautiful site. And that, I fell in love with growing food. And shortly after that, I heard Penny Livingston Stark at the Pioneers Conference in '97 speak about permaculture. And I'd heard the term, but not really been introduced to it. And her presentation was very inspiring, and it made me realize that I didn't have to necessarily choose between growing and building, but there was actually a whole world out there that was very inclusive of seeing how all the pieces fit together. So I began my journey doing my permaculture design course in '99 at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, and later went on to study with Brock Dolman there for a number of years, assisting him in about 8 or 9 permaculture courses along with Penny. And then going through Tagari and the Permaculture Research Institute to be a registered teacher and start teaching some courses on my own, and the whole time farming and learning and putting the practices and techniques into real life experience. And that, led to these experiences being up in West Sonoma at Ocean Song and then down in Big Sur and managing some really amazing projects. But I realized that I still have a lot of experience to learn from and to put more of the techniques into practice. So I've stopped teaching and really have focused in on putting this information that I've learned into practice. So that's currently where I'm at, just taking a big step back and really seeing how to make the least change for the greatest effect with the work that I am doing in combination with nature and, applying these principles and ethics, but also looking outside the permaculture lens, because as we know, permaculture is really just a assemblage of a lot of other techniques and tools and people's ideas and concepts, and just collected into one context. But some of those things, as far as like broadacre keyline design or natural farming techniques or different ecological design that permaculture pulls from, I've really started to look more into those attributes and see how I can expand upon them more than what permaculture was sometimes limiting me, because it kind of gets as people in the permaculture movement know, it does tend to at one point become a permacult, where people fall into a certain clique and then exclude themselves from other.
Right, but then it's not permaculture, right?
That's what you would say, and yet it's a I've attended the international convergences and have hosted and organized a lot of permaculture convergences here in the Bay Area, and even though our intention is to be as inclusive and expansive as possible, there's certain I've found that there's certain practices and patterns in permaculture that naturally tend to limit the I don't know how to say it correctly, but just the encompassing of everything. Even though permaculture is promoting that, there's certain patterns that have been set up that limit the expansiveness of it in these ways, and it's hard to articulate, but it's just
you're doing great.
Observation that I've observed. And so I think it was mostly when I started traveling internationally and seeing how permaculture in certain places like Africa was being applied and very successful, and then looking in other places in India and where it's being applied and used, but there were other movements that were much larger and much more impactful and having huge ramifications, like northern India, like watershed restoration of like whole river systems and hundreds of, or tens of thousands of farmers coming back to re-inhabit the land through a permaculture sense. You'd be like, oh, this is definitely applying the permaculture practices and principles, yet they're not calling it that, and yet the impact is, as far as greening the desert, huge impact, and yet it's not even discussed or brought into the permaculture community. And so it's like, why is that? And why is La Via Campesina, one of the largest peasant farming movements in the world, not included in the permaculture conversation or in the outreach or in the networking? And even here in California, the Latino community is not a huge component of it, even though they're growing and doing most of the work here. So just like looking at and asking those questions as a good permaculturist would, why, and observe and say, okay, why isn't this happening, and how can I step back again and have that thoughtful and protracted observation of where to find the point of leverage and how to work with the ecosystem of our social system. So
just make sure you said ecosystem, right?
Ecosystem, yeah, it's a term that Brock Dolman, again, he's termed a lot, and other people have used as well. We have all this ecosystem restoration that we have to do, but the ecosystem restoration is one of the more, I think, pressing issues of our time right now, especially as we see the effects that our designs and implementations have had on the ecosystem through that will and push and drive to place designs on top of or build on top of systems. So I'm in the urban environment now. Like I said, transplanted. I definitely feel new roots growing, and it's mostly due to the love of my life. My wife, who's recently brought a lot of these social ideas and awareness about. And she's a doctor and also a musician here in San Francisco. And
wow.
And the cultural edge and the diversity and just the life force that's humming in the city is much different than 30 miles outside of it, where a lot of farming and down in Big Sur or different things. And that's where she thrives, and realize if she thrives, I will thrive, and our family will thrive. So we're
smart
here.
Man.
It's been a huge lesson to grow into, but the roots are taking root, and I realized that I need to build a farm if I'm gonna thrive here.
Yeah.
So that's what how Topleaf was born out
Perfect.
of
we call those urban farms.
Urban farms. Yeah.
Urban farms. You are now I dub you an urban farmer.
Oh, well, thank you, Sir Greg.
Absolutely. So a couple of things about your intro we got to kind of touch on. People talking about permaculture, I ask them to define it. What is permaculture?
Permaculture to me is, like many say, an assemblage of conceptual components arranged in a way for sustainable human habitat. And there's definitions from the book and ways that we live by the ethics and the principles. For me, I really see permaculture as a way of life. It's a way to live in balance with nature's ecosystem.
Yeah, perfect. I like to say the art and science of working with nature. So how can we get in the flow and work with nature?
Mm-hmm.
So you also talked about PDC, Permaculture Design Course. So let's talk about, give me 30 seconds on what a permaculture design course is, because I'm really for having all of our listeners out there getting out and doing a PDC. So can you tell them what they'd experience or what the structure is?
Yeah, a PDC is an intro, really. It's a 72-hour drink from a fire hose, so to speak.
72-hour.
Yeah, it's classically put together in 72 hours. The curriculum is based off of the designer's manual that Bill Mollison wrote in '88, and it is a very comprehensive look at how nature works and how we can use appropriate technology, indigenous wisdom, in a way that can work with nature to create a sustainable life, and that we don't end up being the reason of our own demise. So it's a response to the unsustainable pattern of development that we've had, and it's a design course that's designed to awaken and inspire and educate people to participate in a way that is more in line with the natural ecosystem that we live in. And so it's very it's very broad in a certain context, so that it can be applied to any ecosystem, any bioregion, and any culture. There's no prescribed religion or dogma, and the social system is very short compared to the visible structures that it teaches, mostly because there's such different types of cultures that can apply it to it, that we wouldn't want to prescribe a certain way to live by, except for these basic ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share, which are kind of a life ethic of how we can take care of the earth, make sure we take care of each other, and then whatever surplus that's generated from our design, we can invest back into the other two, so that it can create a cyclical pattern of abundance rather than scarcity.
Perfect. So you said 72 hours. You also said intro.
Yeah.
Really?
It's like, it's like you look at, yoga trainings, for example.
Oh, yes.
And it's like 200-hour yoga training.
Right.
And this is a lineage of, thousands and thousands of years. And in 200 hours, are you then you're a certified yoga instructor, but you're still just learning the very basics of that ancient
yoga.
lineage. And so if we look at nature and how long the design has been in place and the patterns has developed from eons and millennium, and it's like evolution in the making. It's the apex, it's the climax of all of evolution is now. Granted, we have these extinctions and patterns and cycles that have brought us to what we have now, but it's still building upon itself in that succession of evolution. So, it's to understand the complexity of that. When I said drinking from a fire hose, it's also like going down this main river, and we're just looking up these canyons that later you'll come and explore. So, for example, keyline design is touched upon in the earthworks and water management component, and it's looking at how to read the landscape to understand where water collection meets water dispersal. So as we start to do earthworks, we're working with the natural pattern of the earth. That is usually covered in maybe a couple of hours or an afternoon of the design course. And I had the pleasure of taking Darren Doherty's
keyline design course. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, the very first one in 2007 when Wes Rowe brought him out to California, and it was a 7-day keyline design course. So it was taking that 2-3 hour afternoon
canyon, as you called it.
Yeah, and really expanding it into a 7 day, and still it was like, wow, there's still so much more here to dive into. So, it's a lifelong journey, and I think a lot of people, when they take a PDC, they then feel empowered to go out there and start practicing and teaching, and really, as it was prescribed, take a couple of years and put it in practice and understand, work, find a mentor, learn with someone. But it's in some ways a prerequisite for being human to look at the context of this system, of nature's system and ecosystem, and how we can then participate in a way that's more regenerative than degenerative.
Yeah. Some of my favorite words, regenerative.
Yeah, all the buzzwords in permaculture definitely are there, and I could probably rant a whole rap on them, and people do, and that's I think that's one of the issues that sometimes isolates the permaculture community from others. Like I was talking about earlier, is that they start speaking in these terms that people don't necessarily understand because they're so broad, and yet they have meaning and they do speak to something specific, but yet. Sometimes the people go through a course and they get really inspired about food forests and stacking functions and seeing the least change for the greatest effect, and they start using them in their vernacular, and we're encouraged because then that's how we learn. And yet they sometimes lose sight of the actual meaning behind it and can't articulate what they mean when they say stacking functions, or what they mean when they say the opportunity, the problem is an opportunity, or these different principles.
I'll tell you, when I did my first permaculture design course in 1991, it was a game changer for my life. I had a sore forehead where I kept smacking myself saying, oh my gosh, this is what I've dreamed about all my life.
Yeah, and I would turn that around, and say like, wow, what is it in that really sparks that awareness, and is it the techniques and the information that's learned, or is it also the community that comes together and the people that you meet in the learning environment? There's so many different components that come together in that moment. And also when we're ready to take that course, or when we're ready to open our eyes and understand that there's a much larger system that we can participate in.
Yeah. So, hey, thank you so much for sharing about all this, because it's not often that I've had a actual permaculture design course teacher on the podcast. So that was a nice deep dive. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah.
So tell us about Topleaf Farms.
So Topleaf Farms is a company that I started just over a year ago, and it was in response to a project that I was called into to consult on. A good friend who I actually met in my design course at Occidental Arts and Ecology was Josiah Cain, who's he's in the world of living roofs and vertical wall systems. He's well known. He's done a lot. He has a master's from Harvard, and he's a very good friend of mine. We've had a great relationship and working together and being close. He was called in to consult on a project. They wanted to do a living roof. They wanted to grow food on the roof. They said, how cool would it be not just have a living roof? What if we did a a roof farm.
Yeah.
And as soon as he heard that part, he said, "Oh, I should call Ben in. Let's bring Ben into this conversation." So through the consultant, I got called in to consult on what's the feasibility of turning a living roof into a roof farm. What are all the things you have to consider? And I gave my initial design consult presentation, and later the client came back saying, we really want to explore this. We really want to dive into this more and see. Let's go through the develop design phase and see how this can really work on our buildings. We're committed to any project we have. We want to do a roof farm on. And I was like, that's great. Let's do it. So we went through it. I worked with another local grower here, Daniel Miller from Spiral Gardens, and we did the design development phase and came up with a pretty good design, and it all looks good on paper, and they bought it and they said, all right, will you install it for us? And in order to do that, I needed to finally go ahead and get my contractor's license. I'd been working with Eric Olson from Permaculture Artisans, and he's a licensed contractor up in Sebastopol in Sonoma County. And I also had worked for Josiah, but I realized, okay, if I'm going to take this project, I should get my contractor's license. So Topleaf Farms was born as a licensed landscape contractor with this primary client to install this 12,000 square feet of rooftop farm that's a monolithic, intensive system. So it's not much greenhouse, not hydroponic or aquaponic, but like a living roof growing medium. Wow. And as the design development then went to construction documents and through the permitting phase, it took a while. It's still parts of that are taking its toll on the project, but we are in construction right now of that project in downtown Berkeley. It's a 72 unit residential building geared towards the students at UC Berkeley. Wow. And like I said, it's 12,000 square feet of growing space on top of
roof.
16. Yeah, it's actually 16 separate roofs. They designed the building to have a lot of space for outside gathering of the students and common space. And so all the hallways are open air. There's a lot of, instead of one big building, it's these separate buildings at 3, 4, and 5 stories. And they're about 30 by 30 each one, so that you can think of them as big planter beds, so to speak. And as we went through the process, we had to drop the weight constraints down, and then that changed the design considerably. So now we're in this hybrid kind of hydroponic growing medium type design. Yeah, so the really cool thing about this project is that the building is supporting the actual farm. So down in the basement, there's a processing area, there's a farm annex, there's a fertigation system that basically comes up to every roof where we can inject our nutrients into the water, and then and also recycle some of the water back into the system. So it's very integral to the building itself. So the building is kind of taking on more of a living nature in that way. And
fantastic.
And then the operation of it is the second component, which is then where the food is going. And the ideal goal is to hyper local, ultra fresh, go to the people that are living right underneath it. So instead of food miles and food feet, we're actually like almost negative.
Food inches. Food altitude.
Yeah, the vertical feet in that regard. So trying to keep it more like an integrated CSA with the residents of the building, and then also local restaurants that will deliver by bike to the chefs within a 3-mile radius of the farm. And the thing I learned while farming at Esalen, where we had 300 people a day eating from that salad bar, was the difference between food that's grown and harvested the same day as opposed to stuff that is even just a day or 3 days old, or stuff we get in the supermarket or even at the farmer's market sometimes is the day before. The difference is outstanding. Broccoli taste, lettuce taste completely different. And so our goal is to have a production and distribution of the food with as limited fossil fuels as possible, and have that happen within the same day. So the food that we harvest that same day going to the mouths that would eat it that same day. And then also keeping like I said, the footprint down as low as possible.
Wow. Are you going to have a farm manager?
Currently, that's me, and then I'm kind of leading the show right now. But I am. The goal is to actually build these farms to be worker producer co-ops,
Perfect.
and train farmers in the system, and then have them take over the running of them. And when I say them, the same client, they have about 7 or 8 projects in the East Bay, and the second project that then they called me into, which we're in the design phase of, is in Oakland, and it's about an acre of roof, so it's like 40,000 square feet of rooftop. And instead of separate, they're just 2 big roofs. One's about 18, and the other one's about the same in their square footage. And that one has some greenhouses and 208 units, and also residential units underneath. So it's a much larger project, and the city there is very excited. And Topleaf be able to use the site while they wait for the permit. So they gave us the site to put in a nursery and a little seed farm in order to utilize the space and get people excited and demonstrate what we're going to be doing on the roof on the ground level while we're a year or two probably before the permits actually come into play.
So is this the Urban Seed Project?
Yeah, the urban seed, farms need seed to grow. And a big part of our production model is in the macro and microgreens and lettuce mixes and kales and things that are somewhat seed intensive. And so, I've been involved with growing seed and the Organic Seed Alliance and different seed networks in how we can reclaim kind of the seed sovereignty as corporations have been taking more and more ownership of them. And someone who you've had on the podcast before, Bill McDorman, I took his seed school years ago where we met. And
you and I met there.
He really just kind of, as I know he does with many, inoculated my mind with so much information and enthusiasm and excitement around growing seeds. And so when we look at the crops that are seed intensive, meaning that we're sowing a lot, we're growing, especially micro and macrogreens, so much seed is used in that because it's just a sprout. How to, as a business model, it's like, I want to start producing some of that seed. On a greater context, having a locally produced seed has its benefits. And then also, what if we're looking at seeds that are adapted to the urban environment, meaning plants that do well in somewhat shallow soils that are that can be interplanted with other species, have certain resistance to different pests, and then also the heat island effect that's there. There's a number of urban climate
issues.
Issues and situations that plants adapt to their environment, and you take one variety and you grow it in the urban environment and let it go to seed. That seed is going to be adapted to that environment for the next generation. And so I'm working with Don Tipping up at Siskiyou Seeds to help advise on first starting with the varieties and then the actual science behind the breeding of different varieties, selecting for specific traits to improve upon them for the urban environment. And our hope is that we will make an improvement. Sometimes you do this work and down the road you realize you haven't improved it much. It was already great to start with. But there's a whole network right now. The Bay Area, there's this real buzz. There's been a buzz for a while around local food, but right now about producing that food within the city and urban ag. Just as you know, and all your listeners are inspired to listen to this podcast, it's like, okay, let's start growing food where people actually live. Let's start growing it, and what is that food, and where are those seeds coming from? Because often people ask, like, where's my food coming from? But they rarely ask, where are the seeds coming from? And, a lot of them are coming from big corporations, and even these great seed companies we have, a lot of them are just buying from larger corporations and repackaging them and selling them, and that's part of their business model, because it's really hard to grow all your own seed and sell it. So we don't have that intention to grow all our own seed, but we do have an intention to start making the investigation and expansion upon the seed that can be adapted to the urban environment and see where that goes.
I love that it kind of adapts. Seeds will adapt. I have a basil plant growing in my backyard. Now, I live in the desert here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm on my third generation of this basil plant in the back. So it grew out, seeded, and it only gets watered once every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a drought-tolerant basil that grows in my backyard, which is
right.
fantastic.
And that seed will then be more drought-resistant. So
Yep.
it's like it's an unknown good benefit, so to speak.
Yeah,
Right? It's
exactly.
like, I didn't get as much water, and here it is, and now I have this one actually thrived in this condition. And that's really, as we plant out, the big opportunity and potential is how do we get these other urban farms involved, and that's a big component of trying to do a project like this is you need to do trials. So you need to have a certain variety that you're looking at, and then grow it out and really grow it out with people who can observe and notice. And then there's that one or a number of them that actually are more heat tolerant. They don't bolt as much.
Right.
It's like, let's get some seed from that. Okay, now we start selecting for heat tolerance or drought tolerance or pest resistance, and then from there, this is the work that really needs to happen, because we've inherited such a immense amount of genetics from previous plant breeders and seed keepers, and we've somewhat come complacent, like a lot of our society has with many things, on, it's just there, great, we got the seeds and we have the food, and now we realize, we've lost so much of that diversity.
Yeah.
And so now we need to as Bill would say, rejoin the ritual and integrate into this sacred art of keeping the seeds alive.
Yeah.
And, taking that next step of going can we actually start generating and regenerating new types of plants from this? And that's what Luther Burbank, was known for, and many others, and John Navazio and Frank Morton, and these epic characters in our culture and our network who are just they're doing it, and they're the ones, and we all can do it. And there's a way, I think, in the urban environment, we have another opportunity where there's a density of people. And like our project in Oakland, it's right on the corner of 51st and Telegraph. You come off the 80, you go onto the 24, you're coming from Berkeley into downtown Oakland. It's this huge thorough through of people and energy, and, seeing lettuce, a whole crop of lettuce going to seed. Many people don't even know what lettuce looks like going to seed.
Exactly.
I mean, getting into food literacy, some people don't even know lettuce grows on plants. It comes in a bag, some of these kids, so it's like, first, here's the plants growing. Next, this is what it looks like going to seed. And, these are seeds that then we can supply to some of these other urban ag projects, but also home gardeners and other people in the bioregion here. So that's really exciting. And then the start component is, once we have the seeds, it's really hard for some people to start seeds and get them to grow to healthy transplants. So they often just go to the nursery store and buy the transplants. But those transplants are also coming from far away, from a seed that's even farther away. So even though they're thinking I'm growing my own, the ecological footprint of that transplant is already huge in a certain sense, and it has to be pampered and babied to get it to the nursery, and then it's marked up. And so here we are doing a direct marketing of and production of seed starts, so people really can just start engaging more with their own food. And then we want to grow more at a production scale so that we can make a contribution to the food system as opposed to just a token towards it.
Perfect.
And
So you're doing a fundraiser on this right now, yes?
Yeah, the rooftop projects and working with this client on it, they're definitely supplying the resources to build these rooftop farms. However, this interim use of the lot in Oakland is something that they came up with, saying, because they're just so excited about wanting to get something growing, and they realize it's going to be a little while before that project gets off the ground. So they gave me the space and said, all right, show us what you can do. And I'm like, great. They're getting the site prepped right now as we speak, and I just need a little extra resources for the actual infrastructure, small greenhouse, shipping container for the tools, and a lot of things that'll be portable that we'll be able to move on to the next site and even up onto the roof. So we put together a barn raiser, which is very similar to Kickstarter, except it's food and farming focused.
Nice.
And we're trying to raise some resources for the infrastructure of the farm.
Perfect. And where do we find out about that?
You can go to barnraiser.us, and we're one of the, or to our website, farmtheroof.com or topleaffarms.com, and there's links to it on that.
Perfect.
But if you just go to barnraiser, type that in .us, it'll show up on actually one of the community picks right now. It's right on the front page.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Good for you.
So with this project in Oakland, we not only are we wanting to grow seeds and starts, we also we will be growing the food, but we also want to educate and train a new crew of urban farmers and seed stewards to help really prepare to meet the challenges of food production in this time of climate change. Because as we know, we're in this incredible time of chaos within our climate, and there's going to be a lot of factors that come into growing food, even on the farms, but in the urban, it's going to be changing as well. And so, the tools and techniques and strategies, we want to empower and educate people on how to utilize these skills and to be able to grow their own food.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, Farmer Ben, what drives you?
What drives me? Well, the reason I do all this, I think, has a whole new meaning now with my 2-year-old son.
I'll bet.
I have looking at future generations and what am I having or what am I doing today that really is going to have any meaning in the future. Mm-hmm. Before, I think I realized that it was in my blood. It was generations ago, not too long ago. I come from a farming family, and I realized that there was something I just knew felt right as I would put my hands in the earth or as I would engage with growing plants. It just felt right, much more than sitting behind a desk or doing work within the unnatural world, so to speak. Exactly. But now, I have a son, and I think anyone who's become a parent or is a parent can relate to this new sense of responsibility that there's another generation that is going to be inheriting what we have designed and built. And I just want to contribute in a way that can help start to make systematic change in the design that we have. And so growing food is something I love doing, and how can I contribute to that part of the puzzle in a way that can have some influence. And it might just be, the land that I'm able to steward, or it could be a certain seed variety. I don't have any necessarily ego-driven agenda, like I want to create this or build some impressive structure like many architects and designers do. But just the idea of contributing to the ecosystem in a way that is functional and healthy is something that really rewards me. And life is such a gift, and every day that we have to step forward and participate is really something I think a lot of us take for granted, especially here in the U.S., where we have so much abundance and we live a life of such privilege. We there's the permaculture principle, least change for the greatest effect, and often what we do is we have the greatest change for the least effect, or we use so much to do so little. And you go to a place like Africa where they do so much with so little. It's like they get $500 to redo their whole water system for this village, and they do it because they're able to. It's a scarcity, but it's also something that they know how to utilize their resources. And when you have so much resources, you sometimes forget how to be diligent with them. So I think as I see myself in this place of privilege with a lot of resources being able to come, I want to put them to their best use. And I think that's another reason why I decided to go with a crowdsourcing campaign for this project, to see who from the community can contribute, and how can I use those resources to their best ability and be really specific with them is really something that I'm hoping to do, and how it can contribute back to the community by giving starts and seeds and education to the community in a way that can continue to grow, so that $1 will have tenfold its impact.
Effect. Yeah. Oh, there were so many metaphors in that That was perfect. That was perfect. Hey, I'm all about education, and I have to know what one book has been most influential in, framing this conversation in your life.
Fukuoka's One Straw Revolution
Pretty
was
powerful
probably
book.
a big, Masanobu Fukuoka, he probably,
yes.
opened up my perspective to the spiritual aspect. And I read that book shortly after I started farming, and I was like, oh, cool read. But then I visited it again, a couple of years later, and it's such a great book because you can literally sit down and in a couple hours read the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's deep and it's contextual and it's practical, and it's a book I highly recommend anyone who's interested in farming as a way of also, cultivating a certain spirit inside themselves, or they have a calling towards it. This kind of puts a perspective on that. And then, of course, Gaia's Garden that Toby put together years ago, that was a really great read, as well as putting permaculture into a more tangible aspect. So I'd say, those two books really have been helpful in the practical sense.
Perfect. So what one final piece of advice do you have for our listeners?
Grow for it.
Oh, I like that.
I mean, I think Yonto Evans, he's a natural builder up in Oregon, and I sat with him in a natural building colloquium, and at one point he said, know enough to start, because we can get, we can have this paralysis from analysis.
Oh yeah, big time.
We can get caught in these eddies of conceptual design or assessment or vision, and it's a huge responsibility to actually implement something. But when we realize that what we're implementing is just one piece of the puzzle, and it doesn't have to be finalized, it doesn't have to be perfect when we step into it, then it takes a lot of pressure off. And even if it's simple as, building a bench in your garden, you're like, what do I do with my garden? You get all these ideas and all these things. Well, first, build an observation station, build a bench, and that's going to totally change and influence your design, because it's going to get you out there and it's going to sit you there. And then it's like, okay, let's just pull these weeds out, and then you just start somewhere.
Yeah.
You start somewhere, and you start some seeds, and you watch them grow, and before you know it, you're growing a garden.
And you're eating out of your yard.
And if people can start growing and participating in their food system more, I think there'll be a whole new relationship and prioritization around food, which is something that we really desperately need.
Big time.
Big
time. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today and sharing your experiences, Benjamin. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Greg. It's been really great, and I really love the inspiration and the insights that you're helping people achieve here through urban farming.
Perfect. Thank you. So, how can our listeners get a hold of you?
Well, you can go to our website, farmtheroof.com, or send an email to farmtheroof@gmail.com. That's probably the easiest way.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us on the Urban Farm Podcast.
Would you like to grow your own healthy, organic food? Once you know the secrets, it's really quite simple. Imagine saving money at the grocery store, increasing your intake of organic whole foods, cultivating greater food security, and feeling more connected to the earth. Let Urban Farm U diffuse your gardening doubts in our upcoming free webinar, Gardening Unearthed. We will walk you through the 7 key factors for growing your own healthy, organic food easily and without any hard labor. Just text the word GARDEN to 44222 to sign up for your free webinar, or visit urbanfarm.org for more information. With the right knowledge in place, there's no such thing as a black thumb. Remember, that's GARDEN to 44222 to sign up for your free gardening webinar. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen 3 days a week for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.